on Sunday. I'm going to ask Ty Gregorak about that. He's a big, he's like some rock and roll from time to time, Ty Gregorak. So anyway, we got another pair of tickets for you. In fact, we're going to be giving tickets away to the show all week long. Looking forward to this concert on Sunday night at the Adams Center. So we will get to that. Also, by the way, I want to mention Coulter. He's on his way in here. Lady Grizz had their press conference, their sort of opportunity with the media this afternoon. It's a little later in the day, about 3:15, 3:30. So it's taking a little while down at the Adams Center. So he's down there talking with Shannon Schwain, the head coach of the Lady Grizz, of course, and a couple of players as well. So he will be in here momentarily. So we'll get to him in a moment. Hey, you need a new car? You need a used car? How about Mildenberger Motors in Hamilton, family owned for 65 years? Best prices on new and used cars and trucks, only at Mildenberger Motors. Let's open this thing up. And, David, I'm interested on this because you're the one who's kind of following this stuff for us, tracking it for us, and they do all these projections. Who's it? Joe Lunardi, right? He's the big guy who comes in here and puts together the 68-team bracket, and he's doing this thing, every week from about December on. And he's, kind of the go-to on this. But they project all the teams. And all the one-bid leagues, they kind of slot them all in there and just shoot them up there kind of wherever. I don't know if it's clear. But right now, early in the year, this was so funny. Sacramento State was the team. You remember this like a month into the season that was the pick from the Big Sky Conference to go? Well, that has changed quite drastically as we've gotten into the latter part of the season here. Right now, though, the Montana Grizzlies are the team that has, been projected to win the Big Sky Conference tournament. Obviously, we know there's plenty of time and games between now and then. But if that were to happen, as of right now, they are slotted as the number 16 seed in the tournament, the 16 seed in the tournament. David, are you seeing it? Is this all of them? Who are you looking at where you're seeing these 16 seeds?
I looked around the internet, Bleacher Report, Sports Illustrated, CBS Sports. Pretty much every expert that I read had Montana at 16. There were a handful that had them as a 15 seed.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the reason to me that that's the case. And, David, as much, if not more, about this than anybody. But they have no signature wins in terms of the larger national scope of things, and they have one signature loss. And they're coming from a conference that, after having been up into about the middle of the nation in terms of the Ken Palm rankings of conference and RPI and all that kind of stuff, the Big Sky Conference, I don't know where they're slotted this season, but they're going to be in the bottom quarter, maybe the bottom fifth. I mean, they might be 27th, 28th out of 32. They might be 30th, in terms of the national recognition for the conference and the strength of schedule. And so the team coming out of that is already going to have no respect. So if they haven't been able to generate that on their own, they go play 5, major Power 5 schools, and then you get New Mexico and Omaha in there, I guess 4 high major schools, and then New Mexico, which is still a major program, and then Omaha, and they lost all of them. And those aren't bad losses at all, but they didn't do anything to prove that they are, sort of better than that. Now, anybody who's following the University of Montana, the men's program, understands the progression that this team has made since that time and all the freshmen, the minutes that were being played and organizing that stuff out. But you add to that a loss at home to an NAIA school. I mean, it's just what it is. I mean, you're talking about the 2 best years in terms of combined years in the history of the program, translated to a 14 seed and a 15 seed. By the way, hi, Coulter. Welcome.
Hello.
15-3 and then a 15-2 against Michigan, right? The last 2 years. They won a 15 both years.
No.
But nonetheless, so they got a 14 seed 2 years ago, a 15 seed last year, played the same school both years. And no, it doesn't surprise me that right now they're projected as a 16 seed because of all the reasons that I highlighted. What do you think? Do you think that's a reasonable spot for them to be?
Well, the thing you got to remember is that in these tournament projections, so much of the teams that get at-large berths, it's going to be determined by the conference tournament because there's so many leagues, not so many, there's a handful of leagues that you don't have to win the tournament to make the big dance.
Right.
And so you never know when a potential number 1 seed gets upset in the quarterfinals of the conference tournament, and now all of a sudden they're a 3. Or the team that was projected to be a 5th seed because they're the 4th team out of the ACC, they get upset. Or conversely, they make a run all the way to the title game, and then their seed goes up or down. So this is kind of like if everything went chalk.
Right.
The seed that the Big Sky is projected to get in my 14 years covering the league now has been lower 100% of the time than the seed that they actually get, or it's been spot on. It's never been higher, though. And that's the state of the league in terms of the respect. You know what I'm saying? Like
absolutely.
The Big Skies. So if you're projected as a 16 seed, I think that is, it's not good for the league because, again, it's always been about what they project. It's hardly ever been higher. So
right.
I don't know. I think to me, in terms of if Montana was to win the Big Sky tournament and get the bid to the Big Dance, to me, it's way more about where they get sent and who they might play than what seed they actually get. Would you agree with me?
Projections had them in the Midwest against Kansas.
See, like that's a terrible draw.
Well,
it's terrible.
Yeah, you think so?
It's terrible.
Look, if you have a 16 seed, you have a terrible draw.
No, totally. But if you're the 16 seed going to play likely in the state of Kansas against Kansas, that is a way worse draw than going to Spokane to play Gonzaga.
Of course. But I guess here's my thing, though. To your point on upsets in the tournament, let's take the MEAC, for example. Okay, Norfolk State is 9-2. They're on the top of the MEAC. Say they're the 1 seed in the MEAC tournament, okay, but they get upset by Morgan State, who's the 4 seed, who goes on to win the whole thing. Now, all of a sudden, a team that in a projection like this that we're talking about that would have been ahead of Montana potentially, okay, all of a sudden the 4 seed is not going to be ahead of Montana if Montana is the 1 seed in the Big Sky. And so the upset in the small 1-bid leagues will push up the top seeds in the quote-unquote like leagues into a place where you might end up in a 15 seed. I mean, listen, if you are a 16 seed, you need about 6 upsets in other small school leagues or in order to bolster yourself up 2 slots, 2 lines to like a 14 seed. That's highly unlikely. Okay, but you certainly could get to a spot where you move up if you're able to win the tournament and get yourself into maybe a 15 seed. But like you said, I mean, playing Gonzaga in Spokane is a certainly better scenario than playing Kansas in Topeka. But at the end of the day, here's the thing to me. We've talked about this a lot, about the neutral site and creating an atmosphere that is more like what it is in a tournament game. And so you get definitively, or what you hope is definitively, the best team, at least at that time, who's able to win on the strength of just basketball, not riding a wave of enthusiasm from a home crowd or whatever that might be. At the end of the day, barring something completely remarkable like 30 wins, I mean, you would really need to have 30 wins as a Big Sky Conference team. You're just going to have to go in and upset the absolute socks off of somebody.
See, I disagree.
Yes, you will.
It doesn't take 30 wins, though. It takes one marquee win. You have to have one win that makes the country turn their head.
Let me ask you
Eastern
this.
Washington got the best seed that any team from the Big Sky has gotten this decade when they got a 13 seed and they had to go play Xavier. That was a way better draw. Again, we're talking saying it's a better draw to go play Xavier. It's not a good draw, but it's better than going to play Arizona in Phoenix like North Dakota had to a couple years ago. But why did he get that seed? Why were they one spot up? Because they won at Assembly Hall. They beat Indiana. Okay. When the Grizz got the 12 seed, why? Because they beat Stanford and Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Those 2 wins turn heads. You got to just win the one game. Those Grizz teams were not 30-win teams. That team that won a game in the tournament, they didn't even win the league. They didn't even get second in the league. They were the 3rd-place team in the Big Sky that year, but they won the tournament at NAU, and then they got the 12 seed because of the Stanford victory, and they got a favorable draw in Nevada.
I guess, and I accept that. Like, that's fine. But also, it matters what a marquee win is. I mean, that group beat Pitt, who didn't win a game in the ACC.
Totally, it's not a marquee win.
Exactly. Okay, so just so we're clear, a marquee win means beating something like a tournament team from a high major conference or something close to that, as opposed to like if this Montana team would have beat Stanford, that's not going to carry any weight, even though it's a Pac-12 victory for the Montana Grizzlies on the road. I don't know.
Actually, Stanford's is better than people expected. Stanford's a borderline bubble team this year.
Okay.
My guy who has season tickets to the Oregon Ducks, who follows the Pac-12, says that the Pac-12 is going to get between 4 and 5 teams in, and that's going to depend on Stanford and Oregon State.
David, how many teams do you think Pac-12 is going to get?
At least 3.
And would you agree, depending on how the league finishes, that Stanford and Oregon State could also play their way into the tournament?
Oregon State, no chance. Stanford has a small chance.
You think if Oregon State got to 21 wins, they had no chance still? With a win at Oregon?
They'd have to go to the semifinal of the conference tournament or something along
those that's what I'm talking about. When you say play your way in,
but that's not.
That's how I envision it. Play your way in the tournament.
Totally.
Where you find yourself for sure in a semifinal and maybe even more in a championship type of game. The point is, though, Coulter, for this Grizzly team, you got no marquee wins and a loss at home to an NAIA school. And that is just, there's no recovering from that if you're looking for a quote-unquote seed. At the end of the day, on a team like this, in a season like this, you're going to get a matchup against, best case scenario, the number 9 team in the nation, and worst case scenario, the number 1 team in the nation or the number 2 team in the nation. And you're going to have to go in there and just pull an absolute, who did it? Who beat Virginia?
Baltimore County.
Baltimore County, Maryland.
University of Maryland, Baltimore County.
UMBC.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to do something that is completely, amazing.
So here's where
nearly unprecedented.
Here's where I'm at with the Grizz, though. I think that the last 2 years, they had a bunch of guys who got recruited, and in the case of Ahmad Rory and Donovan Dorsey and Kendall Manuel, played at Power 5 schools.
Yeah.
They had guys that were not scared of those matchups whatsoever, but also guys that I think that really believed that they could compete, but then I think ironically felt the pressure of knowing they could be able to compete. Ahmad Rory played in very few basketball games in his life where he had to embrace the underdog mentality. What did Saeed Bridget tell us after the game on Saturday?
Got a bunch of guys with chips on their shoulder.
We got a bunch of dudes with chips on their shoulder. We heard everybody say we weren't going to win the league this year. We heard everybody doubting us. To me, that's a mentality shift. That's way different than, the last 2 years, it's basically been almost, you're just trying to avoid a cataclysmic failure, and that is
a recipe for a loss.
Even losing, but Montana has had to deal with, man, if you guys don't go undefeated in conference play, you're not fulfilling your potential. Now, every win that they stack is icing on the cake.
Right.
What if this team goes 17-3? Right. What if they win out? They'll have a better conference record, more conference wins than they did each of the last 2 years. Yeah. Granted, the league is not as good, certainly, but I don't know, man. I think that this team has a way better chance of having an underdog mentality, and I think that's what you need.
Yes.
Last year's draw was one of the worst draws in the history of the tournament, and that's not hyperbole, because Montana, when you just hear Montana, you say, oh, that's the team from the Big Sky that usually makes it. But I think you expect them to be a lot different than what they were last year. Montana's guards, particularly, were high major level athletic. Michael Ogine and Ahmad Rory are as athletic of a backcourt as you could have found in college basketball last year.
Yes.
And that element of surprise did surprise Michigan the first time they played.
And not
last time they played. They were like, well, we know exactly what these guys can do. Yeah. Don't let number 0 get to the backside alley-oop. Just smash him every time he goes to the rim.
Yeah.
Make number 14 take the contested mid-range jumper, because that's what he'll take, and that's what those guys did, and they had a really hard time finding flow. I think that you could have a way better underdog mentality, because that's what it takes. You have to put the pressure on the top seed. I think Montana, even though they were a 15 seed last year, felt a ton of pressure themselves, and that's a very rare scenario for a 15
totally.
Seed.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I mean, the fact that there was back-to-back matchups against the same team is I mean,
I think it's only happened twice in tournament history.
It's unconscionable, man. Like, I don't know if it's an oversight or a deliberate something. Or
we heard from
terrible.
We heard from somebody on the tournament committee that basically admitted that they wanted to seed Montana as a 15 against Michigan State, and they screwed it up.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's no prize in any case, but I mean, you're right. I mean, playing Michigan twice is just. I mean, it's not fun, man. It's not interesting for Michigan. It's
not interesting for anybody.
Montana.
Right.
You know, and you know, I don't know.
I also think that there's Bobby Moorhead, when he was in studio, former University of Montana basketball player, he talked about this when he was in here last week. He talked about how there is a distinct difference in the way that basketball is played, especially in the Midwest, in the Big Ten, as it is on the West Coast. Gonzaga has blue chippers.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
But they're a West Coast team. So is Montana.
Yeah.
So you can get into an up and down battle, and then maybe you can make some threes and put some pressure on them. When you're banging with the Big Ten like Michigan, you just don't have a chance.
Yeah.
Jamar Coe, if he would have been able to play in the tournament last year, he would not have been any sort of an advantage for Montana because Michigan has 3 guys that are 6'10 or taller.
Right.
If you go against Gonzaga, they have really athletic big guys. Tilly can step outside and shoot it. He's going to the NBA. But he's not the 7-foot-tall bruiser who's going to protect the rim like some of the Big Ten guys. I just think that the matchup's distinctly different.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, there's credence to a lot of that stuff. I mean, at this point, I don't know that Gonzaga is the difference between Xavier and Gonzaga is. Let's put it like this: I don't think there's a difference anymore between Gonzaga and the power. The high major, top shelf, top 10 teams in the country in terms of what they bring to the table. There may be a little bit of difference in the way that they do it, but they can recruit every body and every athleticism that they want in Spokane right now. Xavier, I don't know that Xavier can, even when they are a top 15, top 10 team in the nation. I mean, it's not the same thing as a Michigan State, a Kansas, whatever the case may be.
And it comes down so much to the big guys.
Right.
Because even the middle of the road Power 5 teams, you're going to get a couple guys that play in the front court that make it so that Montana can't play guys like Jared Samuelson and Mac Anderson. So then your rotation and your depth is shot. Whereas if you play an up and down type team, even if they have substantially better athleticism than you can still get away with playing those guys for some minutes.
Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio.
Think about when Montana played Arizona last year. Arizona finished as a middle-of-the-road Pac-12 team. I don't even think Arizona made the tournament last year, did they?
No, I don't think so.
But they had that Chase Jeter kid who he's just unlike anybody in the Big Sky, and he just went nuts.
Right. And, I mean, yeah, that's you're going to have it. It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Take a quick break. Danny Sprinkle, head coach of the Montana State Bobcats men's team, going to join us right after this. Montana State on the road at Portland Thursday, and then back in Bozeman to host the Grizzlies on Saturday. We'll talk to the Cats head coach coming off a sweep of the weekend, 8-6 in conference, and they stand right now in the 4th spot in the Big Sky. So we'll get to him right after this. Hey, the Polaris New Year sales event is on, and now is the time to find your perfect ride at Kurtz Polaris with financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months and savings of up to $3,500. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. The mountains, they're full of snow, lots of it. Man, it's falling all over the place now. At Kurtz, they have all the best machines, apparel, and accessories to take full advantage of the season. Tons of fun. Be safe, be warm, look great. Online at KurtzPolaris.com. The most fun you can have in snow. Kurtz Polaris. Winter awaits.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
Hey, it's Coulter, and I'm here with Catherine from The Advocates. If you've been in a car accident or need help dealing with the insurance companies, you should give The Advocates a call. They can tell you if you have a case right over the phone.
That's right. It doesn't cost anything to call, and we'd be happy to talk to you in a
armories. Save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com. Hey folks, Grizz Greats, the Coaching Tree podcast has been a wonderful podcast series that we're happy to have been a part of, and it reaches its halfway point now. Episode 5 with Don Holst, available wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Grizz Greats in your favorite podcasting platform, and it will be there for you. And Coulter, our conversation with Don Holst, an intriguing and memorable one.
Every single one of these episodes has been entertaining, historical, funny, informative, but this one was the most revelatory. Don Holst talks in detail about his 4 years as the head coach of the University of Montana, his trip to the NCAA tournament in his final season, and his subsequent dismissal following that trip to the Big Dance. Fascinating to hear Don Holst's take on how it all went down about 20 years ago.
The Grizz Greats podcast series is brought to us by Blackfoot Communications, the company that connects you more. Mike Nugent and the Bryan team at Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate, and Stockman's Bar on Front Street downtown, proud supporters of Montana basketball for more than 50 years.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon, Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez. Here's some sports news for you. Leif Schroeder capped off his undefeated season in style, becoming the 36th wrestler in Montana history to win 4 consecutive state championships and the first ever in the history of Bozeman High School. After pinning his first 3 opponents in 91 seconds or less, that's pretty quick, Schroeder beat Brendan Barnes of Flathead by technical fall to win the state championship in the 138-pound weight division. Schroeder will do his collegiate wrestling at the University of Iowa. The Hawkeyes are currently the unanimous #1 wrestling program in the nation.
In the team competition, it was Great Falls High that took home the state AA team trophy, while Sydney won their 3rd consecutive Class A title, their 11th overall under head coach Guy Melby, who's been there for 34 years, and in BC, Glasgow outlasted Huntley Project for the state championship. That's a record 13th team title for the Scotties.
Breaking news this afternoon, Saeed Pridgett has earned the Big Sky Conference Men's Basketball Player of the Week award for his performance against Idaho State and Weber State. Pridgett averaged 24.5 points per game in the wins and was an assist shy of a triple-double versus ISU. The award is Pridgett's 2nd of the season and the 5th of his Grizz career. By the way, last night Portland State beat Idaho. They are now 6-8. They'll be hosting Montana State Thursday.
This ESPN Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound.
It's Cat Grizz Week, boys and girls. It's also Cat Vikings Week in a very odd asymmetry, but such is life, and that's okay. I guess more basketball is better than less, so we get on to it. It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana. Go ahead and check us out on social medias. I tell you to do this every day. Now I'm going to give you a reason. How about that? Okay? Like a parent. You know, the kid is always asking why. Why should I go to @1029 ESPN? I'll tell you why. Because we're giving away tickets to Korn on Sunday there. Okay? So I promise you that this week you follow on Twitter and Instagram @1029 ESPN, and you will have an opportunity to win a pair of tickets to go see Breaking Benjamin and Korn. Do you think Breaking Benjamin saw a boon in sales or listens or whatever it is, you know, on iTunes and on the YouTube and so forth when Breaking Bad got big?
Probably. There was a moment in time where Breaking Benjamin would have actually been the headliner of this concert.
I don't think
only a moment in time.
Yeah,
they had a 4-year peak. I think their 2nd and 3rd albums that were pretty darn big.
Yeah, they were big. There was also a moment in time where I think Korn was sort of working through some things.
Absolutely.
And so and that's also coincided.
Also, I mean, people have probably heard the promo that we have sort of making jest of TRL and when the metalheads like yourself started ruining Total Request Live.
You're applying, that's not a self-applied nomenclature now. You're putting that on me. I'm not saying that about myself.
It was just a fascinating moment when hard rock, alternative, almost heavy metal became popular.
Correct.
And But in the 90s, one of the most fascinating things to me was almost every style of music, and then the pioneers or the front runners of that style, when they became crossover famous, then they hit this peak where then they became like almost a parody of themselves. Yeah. And then so it's like exceptionally cool to like Limp Bizkit and Korn and Kid Rock. And then if you do, you are the lamest person on planet Earth. Korn didn't have to endure the backlash nearly as much as Limp Bizkit. Part of that was Fred Durst's crossover into the romance of the pop world as well. And also those two bands are incomparable in terms of their actual musical prowess.
Well, yeah. Right.
But you know what I'm saying?
Sure, yes, of course.
But there was a lot of bands that the backlash then subsequently basically destroyed them. Mm-hmm. Whereas Korn, that's what's so cool about Korn is they continued to produce great records. Right. And it's not just the nostalgia of the late 90s. They're just a great band that has such a unique sound.
They're touring a record right now.
Totally.
So, for what it's worth. All right, very good. Hey, are you ready for a new truck? Get to Mildenberger Motors in Hamilton for the best deals on the best trucks, Duramax, Chevy, or GMC. It's time now for our Opportunity Bank Coaches Corner. We're happy to have Danny Sprinkle, head coach of the Montana State men's basketball team. He's been joining us each week on these Tuesdays, so we certainly appreciate his time here doing this with us.
We go now to the Reagan's Brothers RV phone line, and we welcome in the head coach of the Montana State men's basketball team, Danny Sprinkle. And, Coach, you go 2-0 over the weekend. You get the season sweep of both the Idaho State Bengals and, for the first time since 2005, Weber State as well. You get to 8-6. You're in the 4th spot. Everything looking up right now. How big was that weekend to just put 2 wins together and get yourself in a spot that you want to be?
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge because it meant a lot kind of in the standings. There's a lot of us kind of jumbled up in the middle of the standings, and to take care of our home court was huge. And obviously to get the first sweep over Weber State, I think we've had since like 2004 or something like that. Was always good when you're building a program. But we still got 6 games left, and the 6 games we have are brutal. We got the 3 home games are against, 3 of the top teams in the conference, and the 3 road games are typical Big Sky travel, at Sac State, at NAU. It's at Portland State this Thursday. So we got our work cut out for us, these last 6 games.
Coach, every time you guys have had a great home win, you always put on Twitter, thanks to the fans, because you guys have really had a good turnout so far this year in terms of making a home court advantage at the Brick. So, how much of it has that contributed? And it seems like your guys are particularly having a pretty good time when they're playing at home.
Yeah, it's huge. I think that's what makes the Big Sky tough is if you can have a great home court advantage. You look over the years, the best teams usually have the best home courts. It's tough to go to Weber State and win. It's tough to go to Montana and win. Eastern at times, Northern Colorado, those teams, it's hard to win on the road, especially when you're traveling. And then, when the home crowd's bringing that energy, I really believe it gives you 5 or 6 points a game.
We've talked all year about this race, this league title race, and the race for seeding, and it seemed like it was in the distant future for a long time. Now, here we are coming down the stretch, and like you said, you just got 3 at home, 3 on the road. The end is near, and you guys are sitting alone in 4th place. So what do you think of the work your guys have done so far to get to 8-6 in league play? But then how do you focus on each game one at a time while still keeping the larger prizes that are on the horizon in perspective?
Yeah, that's the hard part as a coach, is keeping these guys focused and not, because once you get to the end of the year, everybody can kind of sniff that, the Big Sky tournament. And, the teams that can really stay on task and just try to grind out every day. What do we got to do today in practice to get better? And a lot of it is building up towards that tournament. But, we still got, this week's brutal.
Born to America 2. It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. By the way, we will be giving Korn tickets away today and every day on this very show. So if you want to go see Korn Breaking Benjamin Sunday at the Adams Center, stay tuned. We'll get those to you. Top of the hour, 15 minutes from now, Ty Gregorak in studio with us to talk, among other things, Colorado Buffalo football and coaching. I can't wait for this conversation. This is going to be a grand time. But right now, Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television, at Gus Tutel on Twitter, at Skyline Sports MT on Twitter, at 102.9 ESPN on Twitter, where you can also go to win another pair of tickets to Korn as well there on Twitter and Instagram this week. We'll have a pair for you there as well. Coulter, several veteran quarterbacks have been rumored to be either moving or retiring or returning to their teams, whatever the case may be. In this case, we know 66% of this equation of these three quarterbacks. Drew Brees officially today returning, or saying that he's going to return for another run at it with the New Orleans Saints. Phillip Rivers officially not returning to the Los Angeles Chargers and is a free agent. We'll see where he ends up. And, of course, Thomas Brady, who, is out there swirling in the breeze, and we will see what comes of him. The question here isn't where they would go. The question here is this. You are a Minnesota Vikings fan. I am a Green Bay Packers fan. Don't worry about the fact that, of the quarterbacks that are currently on the team. Of these three guys, veteran guys for one season, this season, with the team as constructed or as it's going to be constructed after the draft and so forth in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which quarterback would you want on this team for your team this next season? Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers.
On the Vikings?
That's right.
Any of them. Keep naming them. Name all the quarterbacks in the league. I'd rather have them than Kirk Cousins.
Hey, listen. Okay, so
no, I straight up, I'm being serious. I would rather have Dak Prescott. I don't even think Dak Prescott's good. I'd rather have. I mean, it's a pretty good coin flip for me for Mitch Trubisky and Kirk Cousins, but Trubisky's younger, so I'd probably take him.
That is blasphemous.
I would certainly take. I would certainly take Matt Stafford.
Okay. These three are the three on the list. We know you hate Kirk Cousins.
The answer is Drew Brees.
I'm amazed you said that.
Really?
Yeah.
The other two guys took noticeable steps back this year.
I'm not amazed at that. Let's start here. Without question, the third and last choice is Phillip Rivers. Okay, Phillip Rivers was an interception-throwing machine, and it's just not there for Phillip Rivers as far as I'm concerned. Okay. So this is a two-horse race between Tom Brady and Drew Brees. And I thought you were going to say Tom Brady because he's the winner. Like, I don't think it's that controversial. There's certainly people who would disagree with me because there's people who can disagree with you about anything. But I think it's not that controversial to say at this point in time, from a quarterbacking standpoint, Drew Brees is a better quarterback than Tom Brady.
And Kirk Cousins.
The bitterness. There are no depths to plumb in the bitterness for quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings.
Drew Brees is the best of these three guys.
But he's a one-time Super Bowl winner.
He is.
And if you're talking about getting it done, and when you talk about the mentality and what you do for your team and bringing all the guys up and the great decision-making, the great mind, the great competitiveness, and nobody's saying that Drew Brees doesn't have a great intellect for the game, have a great competitiveness and grind for the game. You can't do what he's done and not have those things. But that is where Tom Brady has always sort of set himself apart, right, is in this insatiable competitiveness that expresses itself through work, practice, preparation, and so on, okay? So I thought, in a one-season scenario where you got great pieces and good pieces all around you, that you would maybe say Tom Brady when you're talking about, okay, let's try and get Minnesota their first ever Super Bowl win, okay? I, though, am 100% with you. I mean, I would take this season Drew Brees in Green Bay if I'm picking between these three and say, let's go, let's see what happens, because his arm, to me, is not the whip that it was 7-8 years ago, but he still can sling it if he needs to. But in any case, his accuracy is as accurate as it's ever been.
He's one of
as
those
far as
accurate passers in NFL history.
Of all time. But even in relation to himself, he's still very accurate now, even if he doesn't have exactly the same zip. And by the way, his down-the-field passing has always been better than Tom Brady, that's never been his quote-unquote strength as a quarterback.
Except for when he had Randy Moss.
Well, right. But if I had Randy Moss, I would just sit back there and punt the ball down the field and say, hey, go run underneath this and go score it a touchdown, So a little different deal there. But in any case, I mean, that is I'm with you on this, and I'm surprised. I guess I am not surprised, but I thought you might say Tom Brady for all those reasons. But you're with Drew Brees, so I guess we agree. David, you are a Houston Texans fan. What's your opinion? Who of these three do you want?
I'm taking Phillip Rivers all day. I want my team to be interesting. And I don't care if that means that I get 3 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, they lose 21-17 because Rivers went down the field. I want it to be interesting. I want to be enthralled each and every Sunday.
Is it interesting to blow every single fourth-quarter lead you've ever had or not be able to win any primetime football games?
You're describing all of Houston sports anyway. All right?
All right, Deshaun Watson for Kirk Cousins, straight up. Bam, now you're even more interested in the Texans.
No. Oh, no.
Here's the thing.
You can't just give me Kirk Cousins.
Well, that's right. I don't want him anymore.
You know what Kirk Cousins...
Well, you're stuck with him.
Ugh. It's only a 3-year contract.
You know why you hate Kirk Cousins? And I think this is a good point that David
because
makes.
he reminds you so much of yourself.
No. 0%.
Because
Kirk Cousins
I know
and
what
I
you
have
want to say
actually
about
nothing
him
in
being
common,
bad.
I don't think.
He's not interesting. Like, to David's point, you know what? If we're going to lose 8 winnable games, at least let there be drama. But Kirk Cousins is drama-free and not interesting and not winning, generally. I mean,
he's just corny and soft and overrated, and he's everything.
They beat the Saints.
I agree. I was there. I watched it. I was jumping up and down on the couch.
Yeah. Okay. So they beat Drew Brees, your boy, who you want now to come in and replace him.
It's interesting to think that Dalvin Cook. What do you think? Would Dalvin Cook be the best running back Tom Brady's ever played with?
I'd have to go back a little bit.
Because the top 3 are Corey Dillon.
Yeah.
So is Dalvin Cook and Corey Dillon. I don't know who's better. Corey Dillon had more longevity so far.
Dalvin Cook's
he's only been in the
young.
league for 3 years.
Yes.
And then Kevin Falk and James White. Those guys aren't traditional running backs. They're pass-catching running backs.
Yeah, I mean, Corey Dillon's probably the best. The difference is that...
Don't sell Danny Woodhead short.
Yeah. I mean, Sony Michel... Even though he fell off the last 6 weeks of the season or so, and it was kind of like, well, what's going on here? He looked like he had the potential to be in the maybe Dalvin Cook's, conversation in terms of what he is. Now, who knows? I mean, the reason is well before it became sort of the norm to do this, Bill Belichick was playing stable community-style running back. And so there isn't a guy who stood out. But if you look back and look at productivity by position, I think you could say that New England has always, Tom Brady has always benefited from a very effective running game, even if there hasn't been the dude who's been back there making it happen. So, that's why, for my money, if Tom Brady or Drew Brees went to Minnesota, would they be better? Little bit. Would it matter enough to make them to put them over some hump where all of a sudden they're NFC and Super Bowl contenders? No. And the reason is because what makes New England a Super Bowl contender each and every year is their head coach more than their quarterback. And so
you're just going to die on this hill.
On the 6 rings and 9 appearances hill, yes, that's the hill I'll die on.
If and when Bill Belichick is the one that gets forced out of New England, and then New England wins another title, will you stand down? You think that's impossible? You think that's an impossible scenario?
That makes no sense.
I think
How
this
can
is
Bill Belichick get forced out of New England and win a title.
Worst.
No.
Okay. This is the worst belief that you have about sports.
I don't think that Tom Brady will win a title again, period. Let alone with Belichick or not. But I do think that Bill Belichick will be the first to leave of if there's a split in the partnership. That Tom Brady is his son. Tom Brady.
You just said, okay, that Tom Brady has taken a significant step back.
He has. Doesn't mean he doesn't think he's immortal. Doesn't mean he's going to try to play for 5, 6, 8 more years.
You mean him and every other professional athlete that's ever played pro sports?
Yeah, but Tom Brady is even more delusional.
But it's not up to Tom Brady. It's up to the GM, who also happens to be Bill Belichick. And it's up to Robert Kraft, certainly, who is the owner. And even though Robert Kraft loves Tom Brady as a son, and I believe all of that, okay? I'm not saying that ain't true. At the end of the day, you know whose skills diminish? Not the coach. The coach's skills don't diminish. The players do. And so that's it. He is staying there, or they're both gone. But there is no scenario in which they don't get along. There's this, quote, divorce or whatever, and it's the coach that has to go and the 40-whatever-year-old quarterback who gets to remain for whatever swan song he has left in him. There's that will never happen. Never. Stu Tell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Hour 1 in the books. What a great hour it was. If you missed anything in the first hour, check it out on the podcast. The podcast available wherever you get your podcasts. They're on, the Apple Podcast, the Spotifys, the Transistors, the Twitches, all the things. Just check out Stu Tell Nuanez. Rate, subscribe, enjoy. It's available there thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel and Blackfoot Communications. Hour number 2, straight ahead. Ty Gregorek. Talk to me about CU, Ty, next.
If you weren't listening to Tutela Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio this week, here's what you missed.
It's the ultimate, we only care about ourselves.
Hello, Montana.
Ken Pom had him at 41% of games decided by 4 points or less, the highest percentage in the entire country.
That's huge.
Basically don't care.
Montana Grizzlies got an 82-70 win.
Oh, wow.
You ever seen the one with the dog?
Montana State has the feeling of a really, really special team because they're the type of team that they can win even when they don't play well. They can win even when certain players don't play well, or they can win even when certain players. It's not even as if Fallon Friggi didn't play well this weekend. Like against Eastern, they didn't even need her. They only played her for about 20 minutes. They really took some minutes off of her. To me, she's going to be the MVP of the league if they continue to roll. And statistics, throw them out the window, doesn't matter. She's not going to be one of the top 5 leading scorers. They're just so balanced. She's going to be the MVP.
That's it.
Montana's their defensive strategy, a lot of the principles remain the same, but their strategy has shifted toward not giving any extra attention at all.
Randy Casey joining us, the offensive lineman from Sandpoint, Idaho, will be coming to the University of Montana to play football for the Grizzlies.
I love Missoula. I have all the Big Sky schools. Montana was obviously my favorite.
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Shout out, Your Diggers, good for you.
Basically don't care.
If you'd like to give me a facial, I would take that.
Toughen up.
That's it.
Disappears from all of our lives forever.
Wonderful.
I don't think that you can really get more embarrassed than Montana did in 2013 by Syracuse.
Yeah. Who cares?
To get ready for the NCAA tournament, you have to play at a neutral site tournament.
It's just not going to happen, and maybe it gets weird on a road trip.
All the time. I live outside my own mind.
Nothing.
There you go again, channeling your inner Craig Johnson.
Jarek Harding, though, is that everybody knows that it's going to him best scorer in the Big Sky Conference, period.
I thought he played an okay game.
Is there anybody else who's got this many freshmen going for him? I don't think so.
Discipline is one of the number one tenets of their entire program.
I'm going to say something that's going to make a lot of people in Western Montana, who follow this stuff, mad at me, and that's okay.
It's such great American history. It's so good.
Like, I don't know that anybody finds Snoop Dogg shocking anymore. I mean, he's doing shows with Martha Stewart. You know what I'm saying?
I gave my 6th grade girlfriend a card and flowers.
There's no way that's going to go that well.
And she said no.
She's horrified by what's transpiring in this very moment.
I can't wait to just move on with my life.
I've never seen it before in a body like his.
Just get me out of here. I cannot wait to leave.
We still don't know what was going on. What a deal that is, indeed.
Tutela Nuanez from 4 to 6 every weekday afternoon on 102.9 ESPN Radio, Montana's best sports talk.
Have you been hurt or disabled? Are you missing time from work and not sure what to do? I'm attorney Chris Helmer, and Clark Fork Law Offices in Missoula is here to help. Our team specializes in worker compensation, personal injury, and Social Security disability. We fight for the benefits you deserve. Call Clark Fork Law at 728-0168 for a free consultation or visit clarkforklaw.com. Again, 728-0168.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good evening, Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez. Here's some sports news for you. Leif Schroeder capped off his undefeated season in style, becoming the 36th wrestler in Montana history to win 4 consecutive state championships.
recruiting is getting crazy. So then you
crazy.
let's talk recruiting, because you just talked about, I mean, Colorado is kind of pounding its chest right now about having the 35th ranked recruiting class. Back in the 90s, like you guys were talking about, I mean, I think I was part of the number 1 recruiting class.
Right.
Seriously. I believe we were. I think we were number 1. And 12 people that's their job. They're a value. Now, coaches still come into play. Don't get me wrong, but the days of picking up your landline or having your mom yell down, hey Ty, SC's on the phone. Okay, Mom, hold on, I'll grab the phone. They've got whole departments sending kids the edits and all this stuff, and it's just a different world.
And yet they're still faxing in their signed piece of paper, so go figure on that. To tell Nuanez 109 ESPN Radio.
We argue about. I love the FCS for a lot of reasons. First of all, I'm from Montana, so I love the Montana schools. I love the stories of the kids that come out of Montana and quote unquote hit it big with the Cats or the Grizz, and what that means to them. I think it's also great, but also, I mean, I obviously understand that the highest level of football in college football is played in the SEC and the Big Ten, no doubt. But to me right now, the money is so impactful that the stratification is just exactly what you think it should be, and that's what drives me crazy. When you have a school like Colorado who's spending millions of dollars and making millions of dollars on football, but it pales in comparison to the amount of money that's being spent and made at places like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, I don't know how you ever break through. It seems as if the stratification of who are the powers is going to remain that way forever, because how do you catch Ohio State if you're Colorado? They have twice as much money as you, and that's the thing that drives me crazy, especially living out west, because if Oregon can only flirt with it with the amount of money they spend, if Washington can only flirt with it with the amount of money they spend, how is anybody else ever going to break through? It just seems to me like the system is established where the hierarchy, it's going to have almost no fluctuation going forward.
Yes, and it doesn't help where, in terms of the West Coast, probably the most tradition-rich perennial powerhouse, SC, is down. That doesn't help. Okay, and why have we seen this emergence in Oregon? Who oh, by the way, all the money you're talking about them spending, they have 0 national championships. They've never won. Washington is a fantastic program. 4 years ago, they're in the playoff, right? Mm-hmm. Fantastic program. They've been a national champion, but it's been since almost 30 years, since 1991. Steve 91. Steve Ettman, and okay. That's a very good question, and I think it's a tough question to answer, because I don't know how you catch up to it. I really don't.
But here's the thing, though, okay? Because if you rewind the clock a decade or less, Clemson wasn't even on the radar in this sort of conversation.
It's interesting.
And now they are, not on the radar, they are the standard in many ways. And the reason to me is because they found that guy. They found the guy who said, this is the place I want to be. This is the place I'm going to go and make it happen. And he's obviously very talented in Dabo Swinney in terms of what he does and how he does it. And to me, the way that you break through, if you are, I won't call them the have-nots. Nobody's a have-not as such, but aren't at that same $200 million, $150 million, whatever it is, athletic budget that some of these schools are at. It's because you find the guy at the spot who says, I'm going to do this here, let's go, and follows through on that. And that is rare. I mean, you can't just find that guy, right?
I think a great example is Kirk Ferentz at Iowa.
Yeah.
And I say that, again, 0 national championships. But they found a guy who is a good man, a good coach, and they have stuck by him through thick and thin. And it wasn't always, no pun intended, roses. I mean, it wasn't always roses at Clemson when Dabo Swinney was early in his career. In fact, one time he went into an article I read. He went into a meeting with the AD thinking he was truly getting fired. And you look at Iowa. All right, what are you going to get with Iowa or Wisconsin? You said Wisconsin. They're going to be very, very good every year. They're probably, minimum going to be an Outback Bowl or a Holiday Bowl, and then every now and then, right? Every 15 3, 4, 5 years, they're going to have a team where they're being talked about potentially as a national champion. Now, can they get there or not? As of late, no.
Or maybe find themselves in a Rose Bowl at the least, or whatever.
You know,
might be,
and what they've done. I mean, Kirk Ferentz has been there since 1999.
Yeah,
right. He's in his 20th season.
Yep.
Or just finished his 20th year, or he's about to go into his 20th season. They have sustained success. I'm sure the old Iowa faithful would absolutely love to get a national champion, like every program wants to. But those things are hard, you know. And Clemson. Talking about the power two, so to speak, Clemson is one of those rare exceptions, kind of like what an Oklahoma is right now. Now, Oklahoma's got a ton of tradition and a ton of history, and Clemson does too, honestly. But it's like you got the power two, and then you've got these other ones that, okay, Notre Dame as an independent. Life is better when Notre Dame's good because people are going to tune in. People are always going to tune in anyway. SC, when SC's good, people are going to tune in. Yes, Pete Carroll had it rolling, and they were awesome. I think the highest-rated national championship in modern times was Texas versus SC. And you've got the SEC that slugs it out every year, in the Big Ten where you're talking about 2-3 teams potentially to make the playoff. The SEC has 2-3 teams. Clemson, where are they going to be at? Is Notre Dame going to actually, be able to finish it this year? And then you got Oklahoma. I mean, I was sitting there, during bowl season, and you're sitting there going, Oklahoma and Oklahoma fans are going to walk away going, with their heads down because they just lost in a playoff. Where you sit there and you go, Oregon just had a dream type season because they're walking away smelling roses, and it's perception and again, it's college football is in a funky place right now. And I have a tough time seeing anybody catching up to the top 2 or 3 in the Big Ten, in the SEC.
Join my former Big Sky assistant coach, Ty Gregorek, talking some college football. The 2 examples that jump to mind in terms of schools that are spending a ton of money and can't break through,
Texas.
Michigan and Texas.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing said, and a lot of times flirting with the Rose Bowl and sometimes in the mix as a top 10 team. I think you see it across the country. Wisconsin's actually had Gary Anderson was there for a minute, right?
Yeah, Bielema was actually there for just picked up and left. They were like, this ain't working.
Well,
is that what
Gary
it was?
Anderson? Gary Anderson bolted for Oregon, an infusion of passion and energy, but when it becomes habit or becomes repetitive over 4 or 5 years, didn't not where we want. Out with the old, let's get a new one, and then 4 or 5 years later, out with that one, in with the new one. I think that gets hard on a program. That's what I'm saying.
And I want to localize this a little bit because you spent 12 years at the University of Montana. Montana had as many coaching changes as anybody in the country, both because of guys having upward mobility. When you talk about from the first national championship in 1995, then Don Reed retires. You go from Mick Dennehy to Joe Glenn, and then when you guys got hired with Bobby Houck the first time around, and then Coach Houck leaves, and then all of a sudden it's Robin Pflugrad and Mick Delaney, and then Bob Stitt, and now back to Bobby Houck. But that is an insane amount of coaching changes, and I think that when you look at it from inside level, people would have said, this last decade it hasn't compared to where Grizz football once was. But to me, I think it's amazing that the level of expectation and consistency. There's only been one losing season at University of Montana since 1985. You see other teams around the country, even if teams like Texas that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars, they bottom out and they have multiple losing seasons in a row. So Montana never reached that level. But from an insider perspective, how hard is it when you go through coaching change after coaching change, regardless of the reason that the change happens?
Well, I think what you're saying is right, but I think that when you look at so Don Reed had the program at the highest level in the peak, right?
Absolutely.
He retires. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then you hire within, he moves on.
But it's still continuity.
Right. But what I'm saying is the first few coaching changes you made or talked about, those coaches had the program at an extremely high level and moved up.
Right.
The last few coaching changes, they were removed essentially. Basic. I mean, with Coach Flew, Coach Delaney, and then Coach Stitt, right? So you're talking about different coaching changes, and I think everyone in this community has to compliment the job that Bobby Houck has done in year 2. But those you can't deny prior to this year that those coaching changes over 2 years for Flew, 3 years for Delaney, 3 years for Stitt, that had an impact on the program, and I think everybody could say realistically and logically that it had a negative effect on the program because it's taken that long to get back to playing Weber State in the quarterfinals. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So listen, every situation is different, right? Every program is different. Every situation is different. I just think that more often than not, like who are you going to find at Michigan that's going to do a better job than Jim Harbaugh?
Totally.
Say what you want about his khakis and tucking in sweatshirts, but who's going to go in there at that place and do a better job than he is?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, Tom Herman's. The problem is he got it going, right? He got it going, beats Georgia in the Sugar. All right.
Yeah, and we're back.
And probably could have left the "we're back" statement out.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe do it. Back it up one more year and then talk about being back, so to speak. But I don't know. I mean, you think if Texas makes a change next year, it won't set the program back? You don't know. You don't have a crystal ball. I mean, Mel Tucker leaving. Who knows who they're going to hire? Is it going to set the program back another 5 years? I don't know. You just don't know.
It's Stu Till Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Ty Gregorak in studio with us. You got another segment in you?
I can't
stick
wait.
Around here? Okay. Now here, because I wanted you to be here for this, okay? We're going to give away 2 tickets to Korn on Sunday night right now, okay? When I tell you to don't call yet, don't flood David in the back yet, people, okay? We'll get there. But if I'm not mistaken, tell me if this is right. You saw Marilyn Manson and Norah Jones in like a 3-day period. Is that right? I mean, that is quite the genre swing, Ty, to go from, I believe it's King Death on Twitter for Marilyn Manson, and then Norah Sweetheart Sultry Jones.
Listen, I've basically been in Montana since 2003, right?
Yeah.
I had my little hiatus in 2010, so we're talking 16.
Yeah,
I'm pushing almost 17 years.
Yeah,
if it comes to town, we're going. All right, we're going. And guy, I don't know who's going to win the tickets. Candace and I'll be there Sunday night.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about.
The last time Korn was here was at the Wilma Theater in 2012, and we were there. So we are making a weekend out of it.
Absolutely,
we will be there with our old concert shirts on, and yes, we had to go to a wedding. Speaking of Mick Delaney, it was Mick Delaney's granddaughter who used to be our babysitter. We had to go to a wedding, and it broke my heart to sell the Manson tickets. So we did not go. Yeah.
But you had them in hand.
Oh yeah.
And it was
I couldn't wait. I have seen Marilyn Manson. I saw Marilyn here in Missoula.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, like I said, if you build it, they will come.
Well, all I'm going to ask you is this, okay, on Sunday, okay? Just be gentle with me down there, okay? Because I will be down there, but just be gentle with me, okay?
My mosh pitting days are.
No, come on. I don't believe that for a second.
You guys
made a
got way too many
career out
kids
of it.
out of the two of you.
Oh, stop with this.
Doing this.
Stop with this.
I swear to God, guys, and this is not a lie, if my son Jax, who's 4 years old, if he was here right now, and you said, "What's your favorite song?" or "We're going to play a song on the radio," he would say, "Play Coming Undone by Korn."
Oh,
he's 4. He's 4.
That's good, man. Well, then. Join Coulter, myself, and the Gregoraks Sunday night, 329-1899. Call right now. We got a pair of tickets for you to go see Korn and Breaking Benjamin at the Adams Center, 329-1899. Pair of tickets right now. We return with Ty Gregorak right after this.
Hi there, it's Les Schwab Alignment and Brakes and Shocks and Wheels and Tires. Some tire places don't offer all that, but we do to help keep you safe. It's our Les Schwab Founders Celebration. Get $50 off an alignment. That's nearly half off regular price when you purchase 4 Reputation or Open Range AT tires all month long. Les Schwab Tires, doing the right thing since 1952. Limited time offer while supplies last. Cannot be combined with other offers. Details at leschwab.com.
In Western Montana, we know shopping local matters, and you may think you'd pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it, but not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with knowledgeable specialists that can answer your questions. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com.
You hear the term small business all the time, but what does it mean? The answer is, it depends. Whether you're a one-woman show or employ over 100 people, at Farmer State Bank, your business is never small to us. Find the tools for success at any Farmer State Bank location or check us out online at farmersebank.com. Farmer State Bank, helping businesses succeed since 1907. Member FDIC.
Hey, it's Coulter, and I'm here with Catherine from The Advocates. If you've been in a car accident or need help dealing with the insurance companies, you should give The Advocates a call. They can tell you if you have a case right over the phone.
That's right. It doesn't cost anything to call, and we'd be happy to talk to you and assess your situation. You don't want to have to deal with contacting the insurance companies and setting up a claim. We can do that for you. We take the hassle out of the process, so you can just focus on getting better.
There you go, folks. If you've been injured in an accident, give The Advocates a call, 406-640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve The Advocates.
Everybody knows that high school sports generate suspense, excitement, and drama.
They also generate higher grade point averages, stronger work habits, and greater self-esteem.
Everybody knows that high school sports give us more value for our entertainment dollar.
They also give us leaders committed to strengthening communities right here in Montana. The true value of playing sports in school can't be measured in wins and losses or dollars and cents. Studies show that participation in sports, along with other extracurricular activities, is one of the best ways to teach leadership, cooperation, accountability, and other invaluable life skills. Don't just stand on the sidelines. Encourage the young people you know to get in the game. When you do, you'll be helping them get ahead in life. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the Montana High School Association and the Montana Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good evening, Ryan Tutel. Colton Nuanez. Here's a little sports news for you. Leif Schroeder, let me get it right, capped off his undefeated season in style, becoming the 36th wrestler in Montana history to win 4 consecutive state championships. He's also the first ever from Bozeman to do it. He pinned his first 3 opponents in 91 seconds or less, and then in the final, Schroeder beat Brendan Barnes of Flathead by technical fall to win the state championship in the 138-pound weight division. Schroeder is going to do his collegiate wrestling at the University of Iowa. The Hawkeyes are the #1 wrestling team in the nation.
Team competition, Great Falls High takes home the state AA trophy, while Sydney won their 3rd consecutive Class A title. That championship is the 11th in the 34-year career of outstanding Eagles head coach Guy Melby. And in Class BC was the Glasgow Scotties who took home the title. That's their state record 13th overall championship.
Saeed Pridgett earned Big Sky Conference Men's Basketball Player of the Week for his performances this weekend against Idaho State and Weber State. Pridgett averaged 24.5 points per game in the wins and was an assist shy of a triple-double versus the Bengals. The award is Pridgett's 2nd of the season and the 5th of his Grizzly career. Also, last night, one Big Sky Conference men's game in action. It was Portland State, who dominated Idaho 90-69. The win moves PSU to 7-8. They're a game and a half behind the Cats, who travel to Portland Thursday. Welcome back. Tutel Nuanez, Ty Gregorak in studio with us, talking Colorado Buffalo football as a portal into the universe, I think is where we're at this point. Glad to have you along. Thanks for being here with us. We appreciate that very much. Congratulations to Brian, who is going to see Korn, with everybody in this room on Sunday evening. So we'll give away tickets all week long here on the show. So continue tuning in for that. If you'd like to listen live, you can go to the web, 1029ESPN.com, the website. You listen live on the Listen Live tab. The stream available thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. Hey, you need a new truck? Get to Mildenberger Motors in Hamilton for the best deals and the best trucks, Duramax, Chevy, or GMC. Ty, a couple more things I wanted to go through with you on this, because we've talked a lot sort of about coaching and programs and how to get a program to be good. What we haven't talked a lot about are the players. And I find it, I don't have a good answer for this, but it's such an odd thing to be a coach who is in families' living rooms, talking with kids, talking about the vision of the program and what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And I'm not saying that any coaches are being disingenuous or lying, although I'm sure that has happened at times where guys knew that they were leaving and kind of selling a bill of goods that wasn't the case. But nonetheless, you are trying to get a kid to sign, on a dotted line for the next 4 or 5 years of his life and a significant portion of what his future is going to be with you in this place. And then to have, I don't know, a windfall of $3 million call you elsewhere. Again, it's hard to necessarily sit here and criticize somebody for making that choice, but also it's more than just, I'm not being a stockbroker anymore. I'm going over here to be, a car, run a car dealership or whatever it might be. You're talking about sort of this added human element to this that I think is somewhat profound, and it's such an interesting thing because that's what ultimately makes it successful, right? So how do you think about this whole process in this?
Well, it's funny you say that, and I didn't know we were going to go there. So what Colorado's going through and what a lot of programs go through each off season, I went through as a player, and that number one recruiting class that I was talking about, we went through it, and we had just beaten Oregon with Akili Smith in the 1998 Aloha Bowl, and I can't remember exactly how many weeks had gone by. But I know that it was a recruiting weekend because I was hosting a linebacker out of California, that we remember it. And Coach Neuheisel had decided to leave. I'll never forget. So the house I lived in was basically all recruited by Bobby Hauck. The group of 4 or 5 of us were all recruited by Bobby, and I'll never forget Bobby coming to our house. And I don't remember if he cried or, if at least there was a tear, welling up a little bit, because he really didn't know what he was going to do as an assistant. I don't know if he'd had the conversation with Rick, Coach knew at the time, that he was going to go to Washington or not. And it's funny, we're sitting here talking about 5.5 million reasons to depart a school. Rick left for just a little over $1 million, and at the time, that was one of the highest paying jobs in the country at the time. Now you're talking about 15, 20, 25 coordinators in the country that are $1 million plus guys.
Right.
Just how times have changed, and I cannot sit here and tell you guys that it didn't hurt. I remember my mom and my grandpa at the dining room table saying, do you think you'll leave ever? I mean, you're kind of a hot young name in the coaching profession right now, and I think he said something along the lines of, and what was probably the truth was, I'm committed to CU, just like Mel Tucker was committed to CU until they basically threw an offer at him that he couldn't refuse. And as a player, it's hard. It is hard because it's easy to say, and you're going to sit and see veteran guys say, you choose the school, right? Because you want to go to the school and represent the school. But the human part of it, like you're talking about, the human element, you like to go to a place where you feel a real bond with these coaches, the guys that you're going to play for and go to battle with, and it was hard, and I took it hard. I really did. I can't tell you that I didn't. I don't think I would have ever left CU, but those emotions and those thoughts do go through your head. And I listen, I wasn't a great player. I was a decent player. I was surrounded by great players. I played with Dan Graham and Andre Girard and some dudes that were flat dudes that played long careers in the NFL. Jay Sean Sykes, and there's some other dudes that I played with where you're sitting there going, wow, dude, I'm just a white boy from Spokane, man. I mean, you see some of these dudes and they can play. No, it's hard. It is hard, and you build these relationships. You build those relationships. I've known Coach Hauck, guys, since I was 16 years old. When that first recruiting letter came through, and I remember when his girls were born. I remember when Robbie was born. I mean, you just build those relationships, and I was fortunate enough. I didn't even play my senior year, and I didn't grow up wanting to be a football coach. I mean, some kids, the Brandon Fishers of the world, where they grow up, around ball, that's kind of what they're destined to do, so to speak. And I didn't know that I wanted to do it. And I'll never forget Coach New calling and saying, you want to come give this a shot as a GA? And it was hard to say no. I mean, it was the University of I actually grew up wanting to be a Husky and in the state of Washington. And both my parents went to Washington. They met at Washington. And so it was an easy yes, and I'll never forget him saying, you'll find out in a hurry if you really want to do this, because we are going to work you like a dog. And they did. And it all happened. I have no regrets. I mean, you can't sit there and go, well, what if I would have gone to Stanford or SC or Ohio State or, one of the other visits that I took? You can't look at it like that, because my whole life, any way you cut it, is based on saying yes and getting the opportunity to go to the University of Colorado, because then it led me to the University of Washington, and then it led me to Missoula, Montana, and I've been in Montana almost ever since, you know, and so, they're kids, make no mistake. You're talking about 18-year-old kids, and even the older guys on the team, 21, 22, 23-year-old, they're still kids, so it's hard, for sure. It's hard on their families, because you're a salesman. Right. I actually used that line when I was interviewing with Stryker. It's like, guys, I've been doing this for 18 years. I've been selling. I've been selling. You're just selling in a different way and selling to different people, and so anyway, it'll be interesting to see. And we don't need to talk much more about Boulder, but it'll be interesting to see what happens down there. It's a very very special place that's been, kind of trying to find its way back to those glory years of the late 80s and early 90s and into the mid 90s for quite some time now.
I got two different recruiting questions for you.
Oh boy.
Number one, I thought that both Bobby Hauck and Jeff Choate, this recent signing day, touched on this in a different, sort of similar but different fashions, but they both talked about the evaluation element of recruiting, especially at this level, because as Coach Choate said, when you're looking at a guy like Dante Fowler or a guy like Danny Shelton, the evaluation's very easy. You watch him for 2 plays, you say, okay, that guy could probably play at anywhere in the country. It's a little bit different evaluating guys at the FCS level, especially because you're projecting. So much of these guys are developmental guys, especially when you talk about the offensive lines, the defensive lines. How hard is it to evaluate, and what are the hardest positions to evaluate when you're recruiting at the FCS level?
Well, and that's a great question, and I think one of the things where when Montana was rolling for a long time, they didn't have to go too far from Montana to find big men and develop them. Not always, right? I mean, there was always the good out of state players. I mean, shoot, when that last couple of years that we were here, boy, the Levi Horns and. Yep. And the J.D. Quinns, we had some dudes up front, but those guys were also complemented by the Colin Dows and the Taryn Hillslands and those big men that we could find in Montana. The FCS level, you're right, it is a wonderful level of football. With football, and a lot of people don't understand this. With football, you can break up scholarships. Mm-hmm. With other sports. You can't always do that, right? Just using volleyball as an example, because that's near and dear to my heart and my family. You're either a full scholarship or you're a walk-on, right? And there's obviously still the level of walk-on in football, but one of the very cool things is you can break up scholarships, and we've had conversations over the years. It's like, wouldn't it be kind of cool if everyone got a half, and then what they got from then on they earned. Obviously,
everybody half right. That's interesting.
That would never happen, obviously, because you're going to have those battles in state for the Croy Biermans of the world, and kids where you just know you're going to have the Brock Coyles, where you're going to have to throw a full.
Were they good? They were good, huh? Croy and Brock.
Yeah, they were very good.
Okay,
very
thanks.
good.
Good insight.
But no, I mean it's a wonderful level. It's an interesting one to recruit. To answer your question on the evaluation, I always thought it was challenging to evaluate, and maybe this was just from my perspective because I was a defensive guy. I thought it was hard to evaluate offensive linemen. I really did, just because different guys, and I'm the same way. We all fall in the same boat. We have like certain, I want them all to look like Dante and Brock and Caleb and just these big dudes that you just hope to develop a little bit and let them do their thing, or the 6'5", 6'6" kid who maybe he's a little skinny in high school, but he's got that shoulders and those legs and that big butt that he's just going to grow. Just give him time. the Dylan McFarlands and the Chad Germers of the world, and these people where they're just big, long men that if they eat right and they're in a good weight program and they put the work in, that you've done that work too. They're a hard worker. They're going to build themselves into these fantastic players. But I always thought offensive line was a challenge. The quarterback position. You sit there and you watch high school tape and you're like, wow, that kid can play, right? I mean, he can just flat play. How's that going to translate into the college game? And that's true with everybody. I mean, defensively, as a linebacker, shoot, Dante's obviously special because his measurables are so special. But I sure loved having John Paul Keningata and Herbert Gamboa and guys that were undersized but could flat run and hit and love football. And I think that right there is the hardest part of the evaluation anymore is, do you love football? Or are you just enjoying the Twitter game? And I'm blessed and honored to receive. And I mean, I saw a kid. I don't know if it's all the people that I follow on Twitter, because it's still probably most of my coaching circle, and so I get these kids' tweets and stuff because they like them or retweet them. I guess you can't. I don't even know what you can do anymore. It's been exactly 1 year and 15 days since I was in that game. But I saw a kid. He's like, I'm sorry to say this to the world, but I'm gonna move my commitment date, past June 28th. And I actually had to reread it. I'm like, June 28th, like you're gonna commit on June 28th. Like what's so special about that day? You're gonna commit in the summer. I mean, one kid I saw, my top 14. I actually took a picture of it. I took a picture of it. I'm like, and I'll tell you why I took a picture of it, because I thought it was so funny. Oh yeah, all right. I'm not going to say names, but his top 14 is Alabama, South Carolina, Cal, UCLA, Oregon, Colorado, Tennessee, Miami, Auburn, Washington, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Arizona State, and Oregon State. And
this is in order.
It's an edit, right?
Okay, sure.
It's an edit of the kid, and then his top 14. And I'm going, okay, so are these like the ones that have showed you love? Have they offered you? But then I had to laugh. I'm like, okay, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon State. No offense to my buddies at OSU, but Colorado, UCLA. I'm going, wow.
Why don't you reply and say who was 15th? Who didn't make the cut?
No, but it's just it's such a. Does the kid genuinely love ball?
Yeah,
I think that's the toughest questions to dig in and find out anymore. Is he gonna play through pain? Is he gonna take days off during the week because he's not feeling great? These are the things that you try to find out from coaches and the player themselves, and it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. And you guys always hear it's no science, right? Recruiting's no science. I think you just look for certain measurables. You look for certain length and speed and a certain level of football IQ. I mean, you guys would be shocked if you knew how much football and different things these kids know now than we didn't know coming out of high school, from things like, I don't know, Madden and things
totally.
that they, playing video games. And I mean, Candace and I refuse to let our kids be vidiots or gamers or whatever you guys want to call them. But I mean, you sit and you talk to some of these kids and they're talking like schematic stuff, and you're like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. I don't think I knew that till I was like coaching,
Right.
I mean, it's just different world, man. I mean, we talked about it at the break with the phones. My kids grab my phone and they flip to their stuff, and they can work these things better than myself.
Ty Gregorak in studio with us. We got one segment left. It's going to be about 4 minutes long. Great work by you. Stay here. Mildenberger Motors in Hamilton has the best selection and best prices of new and used GMC, Chevrolet, Cadillac, and Buick. Mildenberger Motors, family owned for 65 years. We wrap things up on a Tuesday right after this.
Seafood lovers, it's time to get cracking at the Montana Club's annual Lobster Fest. Feast on one of our 19 mouth-watering lobster dishes, live Maine lobster, succulent lobster tail, and tantalizing one-of-a-kind lobster specialties. 3 big days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, March 5th through the 7th. It only happens once a year. Don't miss it. See the menu at montanaclub.com. The Montana Club's Lobster Fest on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
When the mountains are calling, a Floco Mocha is just what you need to hit the road. Florence Coffee serves an exclusive, rich, all-natural chocolate blend for a mocha like no other. Top it off with real whipped cream, and you're set for whatever your day has in store. Get your Floco Mocha at any of our locations throughout western Montana and go to FlorenceCoffeeCo.com.
The best flavor under the big sky. Florence Coffee Company.
Hey Gus, you ever heard of Magic Johnson?
Rings a bell.
One of the greatest basketball superstars of all time played for a man named Judd Heathcote at Michigan State. And guess what? Judd Heathcote started his career at the University of Montana.
Coulter, did you know that 2 former University of Montana head coaches have been head coaches in the NBA and 1 on Team USA?
Isn't that amazing?
And that's why we've created Grizz Greats, the Coaching Tree podcast. Get it wherever you get your podcast. Just search Grizz Greats.
It's a phenomenal and historic podcast series proudly presented by Blackfoot Communications and Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate.
Hey, it's Carolyn, the chick who doesn't know about sports. Tune into my weekly segment on Fridays where we talk about, well, I don't really know what we talk about. Sometimes it's sports, sometimes it's athletes. It's usually gossip, but it's always funny.
The Chick Who Doesn't Know About Sports is brought to you each week by the Iron Grizz. The Iron Grizz is hosting weekly wine tastings each Wednesday beginning at 6 p.m. So tune into Tutel Nuanez each Friday to listen to Carolyn.
That's me.
The Chick Who Doesn't Know About Sports. Presented each week by the Iron Grizz next to the University of Montana Golf Course. Ryan, do you remember TRL?
Total Request Live. Wouldn't miss it.
Do you remember the moment in American history where it shifted that heavy metal became pop music?
Yes, I do. I was on the forefront of that choice.
As was Korn. And guess what? 20 years later, Korn is coming to Missoula.
The thing I like about Korn is that it's not merely nostalgia. They've reinvented themselves time and again, have just put out yet another new record. Prolific band and managed to maintain relevance over multiple decades, which most cannot say.
You and I will both be attending the Korn concert, and we're going to hook up a bunch of you as well. Tune in to Tutel Nuanez 4 to 6 every single weekday for your chance to win a pair of tickets to Korn at the Adams Center on Sunday, February 23rd.
Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula.
One is the loneliest number. And that's why we got 3 of us in here. It's Tutel Nuanez and Ty Gregorak, who's been here the whole second hour. I don't know, this is great. I actually have been looking forward to a day off, so if you want to come in tomorrow, that'd be great. I appreciate it.
I got to go back.
Tutel Nuanez, happy to be along with you on a Tuesday afternoon. Hey, if you missed anything in the show, it's been a fun show today. Check it out on the podcast, the Tutel Nuanez podcast, available wherever you get your podcast. It is available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel and Blackfoot Communications. We will get to Pat Kennedy and episode 6 of Grizz Greats, the Coaching Tree podcast tomorrow. So we will have that out for you and spend some time with that with you tomorrow. But we want to finish up with Ty here at Coulter. I know you got, listen, an hour ain't enough. A day ain't enough, but go ahead.
It's true. It's true. This is a very broad question, so we'll have to keep it a little bit short. But I think that one thing that people you were talking about, the fact that people don't really understand how split scholarships work at the FCS level. I think that another thing that people don't understand, especially when we're talking about the SEC and the Big Ten, is that there's a new rule that was passed a couple of years ago. First of all, you can text as much as you want, unlimited texting, unlimited Twitter. But also, if you have certified assistant strength coaches, those people then can be with the players all the time. So a staff like Alabama, they have assistant strength coaches for every single position who are just like the number 2 linebackers coach, the number 2 D-line coach. They can be talking scheme all they want in the weight room. As long as they're not drawing on the board, you're not breaking the rules. think people don't understand that either. But you talk about the staffs and everybody, the way that they recruit now. I guess the question is, the recruiting game, I think that we could all agree is out of control at this point. Is there going to be anything that changes that, though? It seems to me like we're just in this forever exploding world. I don't know when it's ever going to slow down.
No, I don't see it slowing down.
Well, good to have you in, Ty. Thank you for that.
Now, just piggybacking off of where we left off, though, in terms of evaluation and what you're saying, I have heard, and maybe it was you that told me this, Coulter, and I can't remember where I heard this or read this, but let's talk about the team in Fargo, right?
Right.
Okay. Do you know who is very, very much involved in recruiting? I've heard this. Their strength coach.
Right.
Who's the one guy who's been there the whole way through. Yeah.
He's been their strength coach since 2004, and they bring their evaluations specifically of offensive and defensive linemen to him. He has the final say. And he looks at this kid and he says, yeah, I've seen this version of 6'5", 240.
Right.
We can get him to 285 in a year. Let's do it.
Right. I remember it was I used to recruit Minnesota, and I remember, you recruit Minnesota, you're going to be recruiting, you want to be recruiting against North Dakota State because